Welcome to Top Amazing Fact. Ever wondered why donuts have holes? Or why some liquors come with an insect surprise? Or maybe you're curious about what on earth this bizarre dish is? Well, grab a fork, because today we're uncovering the truth behind the strange things hidden in our favorite foods and drinks. We'll explore everything from how Swiss cheese gets its famous holes to the meaning of the mysterious codes on food packaging. And we'll even dive into the surprising connection between Oreos and the world's largest secret society. So, let's dig in and discover the reasons behind some of the weird things you see in food. Holy moly! Donuts have a distinctive shape that makes them instantly recognizable, a torus, to use the technical term. But have you ever wondered how they came to have that famous hole in the middle? There's a popular story that this unique shape was born on a boat in the 19th century, thanks to a creative sailor named Hanson Gregory. As the legend goes, in 1847, Hanson Gregory, a young sailor from Maine, was captaining a ship and snacking on some traditional European donuts. These donuts weren't the ring-shaped treats we know today but rather large, round balls of deep-fried dough. As he steered the ship, Hanson wanted to keep both hands on the wheel while still enjoying his snack. To solve this problem, he started impaling the donuts on the spokes of the ship's wooden steering wheel. This allowed him to grab a bite without taking his hands off the wheel. According to the story, Hanson found the donuts were much easier to eat with a hole in the middle, so he began making them that way on purpose. Thus, the ring donut was born, or so the story goes. This colorful tale is well loved in Maine, but it's almost entirely fictional. In fact, Hanson Gregory himself debunked this myth in a 1916 newspaper interview. However, he still claimed credit for inventing the ring-shaped donut, offering a more practical explanation for his innovation. When making donuts, the process involves deep frying them in hot oil. Hanson noticed that when frying a solid ball of dough, the outside would often cook faster than the inside, leaving the center undercooked while the exterior became too tough. This was a common problem with traditional European donuts. To solve this, Hanson realized that by cutting a hole in the middle of the dough before frying, the hot oil could cook both the outer and inner parts more evenly. This simple change resulted in a perfectly fried donut, crispy on the outside and fully cooked through the middle. Hanson began making these ring-shaped donuts on his voyage, and upon returning home, he shared his newfound recipe with his mother. She, in turn, shared it with her friends, and soon, these new donuts with holes became all the rage in Maine. The idea quickly spread across the United States, revolutionizing the way donuts were made. By the 1940s, the Donut Corporation of America officially recognized Hanson Gregory as the inventor of the ring donut, cementing his place in culinary history. And so, the iconic donut with a hole, beloved by many, was indeed born at sea. Not by accident but by the clever thinking of a sailor who wanted a better way to enjoy his snack. Stargazy pie. Let's take a trip to England, a country known for its quirky foods like beans on toast and Marmite. But wait, what on earth is that? Introducing Stargazy pie, a dish so strange it might make you do a double take. This savory pie features the heads of several large sardines, called pilchards. Sticking out through the crust, their eyes looking up as if they're gazing at the stars. It might look like something from a madman's kitchen. But Stargazy pie actually has a fascinating backstory that dates back 500 years. The tale begins in the 16th century in the small fishing village of Mousehole, pronounced Mosul, in Cornwall. One winter, the village was hit by terrible storms, so fierce that no fishing boats could set sail without risking destruction. Since fish were the main source of food for the villagers, by the time Christmas rolled around, the entire community was facing the threat of starvation. That is, until a brave fisherman named Tom Bawcock decided he couldn't sit back any longer. He chose to face the raging seas and ventured out into the storm. The villagers waited anxiously for Tom's return, fearing the worst. But to their relief, Tom's boat eventually appeared on the horizon, and he returned safely to the harbor, his boat brimming with fish. To celebrate Tom's bravery and share his life-saving catch, the villagers cooked all the fish into a massive pie. According to legend, the pie was so packed with fish that their heads and tails poked out through the crust. looking as if they were gazing at the night sky, hence the name, Stargazy Pie. while the accuracy of this legend is hard to verify. After all, any physical evidence was devoured long ago. The story lives on in the hearts of the people of Mousehole. Every year, on December 23rd, the village celebrates Tom Bawcock's Eve, a festival dedicated to the heroic fishermen. The highlight of the event is, of course, the serving of stargazy pies, which are made to honor the dish that, according to the legend, saved the village 500 years ago. So, while stargazy pie might look bizarre, it comes with an incredible origin story rooted in courage and community spirit. But let's be honest, you still won't catch me eating a pie that stares back at me. If I ever find myself in Mousehole, I think I'll stick with a classic fish and chips. Thank you very much. The whole truth. Cartoons might have you believe that the famous holes in Swiss Emmental cheese are made by hungry mice nibbling away. But the real reason behind those holes is much more scientific. It all starts with the cows on dairy farms. When cows are milked, tiny specks of hay often end up in the milk buckets. This hay contains a natural type of bacteria called propionibacteria. As the milk ages to become Emmental cheese, this bacteria releases carbon dioxide gas, forming bubbles that create the iconic holes. Without propionibacteria, Swiss cheese would be perfectly smooth. In fact, Emmental cheese today has fewer holes than it did in the past because modern dairy farms use cleaner milking methods, reducing the amount of hay and other particles that get into the milk. Some ultra-sanitary cheesemakers even have to add powdered hay back into the cheese, making process just to bring back some of those classic holes. So, Swiss cheese isn't made wholly by mice, it's all about the science of cheese making. And that's not the only surprising truth the dairy industry has been keeping from us. While every kid knows that cheese is colored with a yellow crayon in their coloring book, you might be shocked to find out that some of your favorite cheeses are actually dyed yellow. The natural color of cheese depends on what the cows eat. In the summer, cows graze on fresh green grass, which is rich in beta-carotene, a pigment that ends up in their milk. This pigment gives the cheese a natural yellow tint as it ages. But in the winter, cows eat dried grass or hay. The drying process destroys the beta-carotene, so the cheese made from winter milk is much paler, almost off-white. Back in 16th century England, cheese made from summer milk was highly prized because of its rich color. But some clever cheesemakers realized they could dye their pale winter cheese to look like summer cheese and fool their customers. They used natural dyes like carrot juice, saffron, and annatto, a red dye, to give their cheese a vibrant yellow or even orange color. As a result, brightly colored cheeses like red Leicester, Colby, and orange cheddar were born. Consumers began to associate a deep, rich color with high-quality cheese, and these dyed cheeses became incredibly popular. Today, our grocery store shelves are still filled with these colorful cheeses, a lasting result of a clever trick by a few crafty English farmers more than 500 years ago. So, if your favorite cheese is bright yellow or orange, you've been caught up in a centuries-old con. Those sneaky cheesemakers. Glue for dinner. Reading an ingredients label these days can feel like flipping through a chemistry textbook, full of additives with names that are hard to pronounce. We consume these mysterious additives daily, and one of the most common among them is a molecule called cellulose. You'll find cellulose in everything from tomato sauce and cookies to hot dogs and bagels. Surprisingly, this molecule is derived from sawdust. Now, before you panic, it's important to know that you're not actually eating raw sawdust when you consume cellulose. Cellulose is found in all plants, including healthy vegetables like broccoli, so it's completely safe for humans to eat. When cellulose is extracted from waste sawdust, it's added to food to improve texture or increase fiber content. So, while it might sound weird, it's not harmful. But cellulose isn't the only strange additive in our food. Take ammonia, for example, a chemical compound that is toxic and can cause burns if it comes into contact with skin. Over the past 15 years, it's come to light that some food manufacturers use ammonia to treat ground beef. They blast the meat with ammonia to kill harmful bacteria, and some of it dissolves into the meat's moisture. This treated ground beef is then packaged and sold in grocery stores. At first glance, this might sound like a recipe for disaster, feeding people poisoned meat. However, the FDA has stated that this practice is safe because only a small amount of ammonia mixed with water is used, and by the time the process is complete, there are barely any traces of ammonia left. Still, this practice does highlight just how many chemicals are involved in food production, and it's not just ground meats that are affected. If you've ever bought a cheap steak from the grocery store, there's a chance it was made with something called transglutaminase, also known as meat glue. This is a naturally occurring enzyme found in animals that helps bond tissues together. Meat manufacturers use it to bind small scraps of meat into larger cuts like steaks or chops. These frankensteaks are much cheaper to produce than whole cuts of meat. However, the European Union banned transglutaminase in 2010. Why? When different pieces of meat are glued together, it increases the risk of bacteria being introduced, which can be dangerous. But in America, the use of meat glue is still allowed, so our grocery store shelves are filled with glued meat, and we're free to eat transglutaminase whenever we want. Ah, freedom! Pagan pumpkins. Carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns is a classic Halloween tradition. But did you know this custom actually began thousands of years before Halloween even existed? The tradition started with ancient pagans in what we now call Ireland and Britain. Hay celebrated a Celtic holiday called Samhain, which marked the beginning of winter. The Celts believed that during Samhain, the doorway to the spirit world opened, allowing spirits and demons to roam freely on earth. To scare these evil spirits away, the pagans began dressing up in spooky costumes, lighting bonfires, and carving scary faces into turnips. The Irish Celts, in particular, celebrated Samhain for centuries until the 5th century CE, when European Catholics began converting Ireland to Christianity. The Christians understood that converting the Celts would be a gradual process, so instead of erasing Celtic culture altogether, they decided to incorporate some of the pagan celebrations into the Catholic calendar. This included adapting the Christian holiday of All Hallows Eve, the evening before All Hallows Day, also known as All Saints' Day, by adding elements of Samhain, such as telling ghost stories and carving turnips or rutabagas. This blend of traditions helped ease the transition from paganism to Christianity in Ireland. As the Irish became predominantly Christian, they came up with a new story to explain the old pagan practice of carving turnips. This legend tells of a trickster named Jack, a notorious drunkard. One night, Jack was visited by Satan at a pub, who offered to buy him a drink in exchange for his soul. Jack, being clever, convinced Satan to turn into a coin to pay the bartender, suggesting that they could then disappear without actually spending the money, thus cheating the barkeep. Satan, intrigued by Jack's cunning, agreed and turned into a coin. But Jack quickly put the coin in his pocket, right next to a silver crucifix, which trapped the devil inside the coin. Jack only agreed to release Satan when he promised not to take Jack's soul to hell when he died. Years later, when Jack finally passed away, the devil kept his promise and didn't take him to hell. However, Jack wasn't allowed into heaven either, because of his sinful life. So, Jack was doomed to wander the Irish wilderness for eternity, carrying a lantern made from a hollowed-out turnip to light his way. This story provided a Christian explanation for the tradition of carving turnips and gave rise to the name jack-o'-lantern. In the 18th century, many Irish settlers moved to America, bringing their Halloween traditions with them. Once in America, they discovered that pumpkins were more abundant and much easier to carve than turnips. So, they adapted their tradition, and the modern jack-o'-lantern was born. Today, this Halloween icon is a reminder of its roots in ancient pagan rituals, turnip carvings, and the wandering spirit of a crafty trickster named Jack. Conspira cookies. Oreos are the best-selling cookie in the world, and each one is stamped with a distinctive design. Most of us don't pay much attention to it, but some conspiracy theorists are fascinated by the pattern, believing it hides a dark secret. You see, Oreos are made by Nabisco, and these theorists have noticed that both the Oreo design and Nabisco's logo feature an ancient symbol known as the Cross of Lorraine. This symbol appears on every Nabisco product and is also used by the Freemasons, the largest secret society in the world. The Freemasons have over 6 million members globally. And while no one outside their circle knows exactly what they do behind closed doors, there are plenty of rumors. People have speculated that they meddle in political elections and silence those who threaten to reveal their secrets. The society uses many ancient symbols to represent different ranks. including the Cross of Lorraine and another symbol called the cross patty, though seeing this on an Oreo might be a bit of a stretch. Some believe these similarities prove that Nabisco and Oreos are connected to Freemasonry. However, these theories have some gaps. The Freemasons were founded in 1599, but the Cross of Lorraine dates back even further, all the way to 1095 AD. When it was used by the Knights Templar, a Catholic military order during the Holy Crusades. The symbol has been adopted by many different groups over the centuries. And the design of an oval topped with a cross was commonly used by printers in 15th century Venice as a mark of quality. In 1898, Nabisco's first chairman, Adolphus Green, came across this symbol while flipping through an old Venetian book. He saw the Cross of Lorraine stamped on the pages and decided to adopt it as Nabisco's logo, completely unaware of any connections to Freemasonry. The Oreo pattern we see today was designed in 1952 by a Nabisco employee named William A. Turner. In 2011, Turner's son clarified that his father was not a Freemason and that his design contained no hidden meanings. Turner included the Cross of Lorraine simply as a nod to Nabisco's logo, and what some think is a cross patty is actually just a flower. All of this suggests that any connection between Oreos and the Freemasons is purely coincidental. So, the next time you twist, lick, and dunk your Oreos in milk, you aren't secretly pledging allegiance to a secret society. Or, at least, that's what they want you to think. Creepy crawly cocktail. It's pretty common for an alcoholic drink to come with a garnish like an olive or a tiny umbrella. But there's a Mexican spirit called mezcal that takes things to a whole new level. It often comes with a worm floating inside the bottle. This eerie decoration has a fascinating backstory. Mezcal is made by fermenting the juice from the roasted heart of the agave plant, which is a favorite snack of the maguey worm. According to legend, back in the 1940s, a mezcal maker named Jacobo Lozano Paez accidentally roasted an agave heart that still had some maguey worms inside. Instead of tossing out the batch, Jacobo decided to go ahead and make the mezcal anyway. To his surprise, he found that the worm-infused drink tasted even better than his usual recipe. From then on, Jacobo began adding maguey worms to all the mezcal he made and started putting a dead worm in each bottle as his signature touch. At the time, many Americans thought mezcal was just a cheaper version of the more famous agave-based drink, tequila. To make mezcal stand out in the US market, producers decided to adopt Jacobo's worm in the bottle idea. They launched marketing campaigns that falsely claimed the maguey worm was a traditional Mexican garnish and even suggested it had magical properties, like being a hallucinogen, an aphrodisiac, or a good luck charm. These clever marketing tactics worked, and soon enough, mezcal with a worm became a hit in America. However, in Mexico, traditional mezcal rarely comes with a worm, and some people argue that the whole story of Jacobo's worm accident was just a marketing ploy from the start. With all this confusion, one thing's for sure, I could use a stiff drink, worm and all. Unfair air. Life is full of disappointments, and few things are more frustrating than opening a bag of chips only to find it's half empty. Opening what feels like a bag of air can be pretty disheartening. But before you get too upset, you should know that chip manufacturers aren't trying to rip you off. They actually have a pretty good reason for not filling their bags to the top. Well, sort of. You see, the air inside a chip bag isn't regular air at all. It's actually nitrogen gas that's purposely pumped into the packaging. If oxygen were allowed inside the bag, it would make the chips go stale much faster. So, chip makers leave some extra space in each bag, which they fill with nitrogen, an inert gas that doesn't react with the food the way oxygen does. This helps keep the chips fresh and crunchy for a longer time on the shelf. That pocket of nitrogen also acts as a cushion, protecting the chips from getting crushed during transportation to your local store. This extra space is known as slack fill, and while it might seem like you're getting less for your money, it actually helps ensure you don't end up with a bag full of stale, broken crumbs. Still, I can't help but feel like they could fit a few more chips in there, don't you think? Practical packaging. Now that we've taken a peek inside our bags of chips, let's uncover some secrets hidden on their packaging. If you've ever noticed those colorful circles or squares printed on the edge of food packaging, they aren't just there for decoration. These are called process control patches, and they help ensure all the colors on the packaging are printed correctly. For instance, if the blue patch comes out too light, the manufacturer knows that all the blue areas on the package will be too light as well. This allows them to adjust the printer and fix the problem. You can find these patches on most food products, but they aren't the only hidden feature on packaging. In the US, most fruits come with stickers that have a series of numbers called price lookup codes or PLUs. Each fruit has its own unique identification number, which helps grocery stores manage their inventory. But these codes can also tell consumers more about what they're eating. If the code starts with a 9, it usually means the fruit is grown organically. If it starts with an 8, it's typically genetically modified, often for a longer shelf life. Other packaging features are designed to make life easier for the consumer. Take candy bars, for example, they often have a zigzag pattern at the end of the wrapper, making it easier to tear open. Similarly, lollipop sticks often have a small hole in the side. When the candy is made, some of the melted candy flows into this hole and hardens, securing the lollipop head to the stick. This clever design prevents the candy from falling off and also acts as a safety feature. If a child accidentally swallows the stick, the hole allows them to breathe, reducing the risk of choking. Many other products use similar tricks to keep customers safe. In the US, for example, lots of milk jugs have an inverted circle on the side. If the milk goes bad, the bacteria inside produce gas that pushes the circle out, showing you that the milk is no longer safe to drink. This circle also acts as a shock absorber if the jug is dropped. When the jug hits the ground, the circle pops out, absorbing some of the impact and preventing the jug from bursting, saving you from cleaning up a messy spill and shedding tears over spilt milk. Eggs marks the spot. They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and for me, nothing beats waking up to a couple of fried eggs. But have you ever had your breakfast ruined by cracking open an egg and finding a red spot in the yolk? These unsettling marks are known as blood spots, and many people mistakenly think they mean the egg has been fertilized. Gross, right? But don't worry, the reality isn't nearly as disturbing. During the formation of an egg, the yolk is surrounded by tiny blood vessels. If one of these vessels breaks during the egg's production or while it's being laid, it can leave behind a small spot of blood. This can happen to any chicken, but it's more common with older hens. About 4% of eggs have these blood spots, but most of them never make it to your grocery store. That's because of a process called candling, where a bright light is shined through the egg to inspect the inside. Egg producers use this technique to remove eggs with red spots from the production line. However, just like in Pokemon, they can't catch them all, so some eggs with spots do slip through and end up on our breakfast tables. But don't let a little red spot ruin your morning. Blood spots are completely harmless, and these eggs are still perfectly safe to eat. Even though most people prefer to scrape the spot off before cooking, it's totally fine to enjoy your breakfast with a bit of bacon, eggs, and a tiny burst blood vessel. Delicious. Moldy meal. When it comes to food, nobody does it quite like France, a country where a meal might include a baguette, a few cigarettes, some snails, and a slice of moldy cheese. Jokes aside, French cuisine is delicious, and blue cheeses from France are some of the most popular in the world. But many people don't know why we started eating moldy cheese in the first place, or how it's possible to eat this fungal fromage without getting sick. The answer lies in the type of mold used. Many common molds produce harmful mycotoxins that can make us sick. However, blue cheese is made with a specific type of mold called Penicillium roqueforti. While this mold does produce mycotoxins that are poisonous to animals like mice and dogs, it's perfectly safe for humans to eat. That's why we can enjoy blue cheese without any worry. Cheesemakers use Penicillium roqueforti to make blue cheese by adding the mold to the milk right at the start of the cheesemaking process. As the cheese ages, the mold grows, and spikes are inserted into the cheese to create small air pockets or veins where the mold can flourish. This process creates the distinctive blue veins and strong flavor that blue cheese lovers adore. The exact origin of blue cheese is a bit of a mystery, but it's believed to have been accidentally discovered in Central Europe as early as 800 BC. Back then, Cheese stored in caves with the right temperature and humidity naturally developed harmless molds like Penicillium roqueforti. Over time, blue cheese became a beloved staple in many cuisines, allowing people around the world to safely enjoy their moldy treats. That said, it's important to remember that only specific types of mold, like Penicillium roqueforti or other safe Penicillium species, are used in blue cheese. So, don't go scraping mold from your bathroom wall and spreading it on crackers. That's a recipe for disaster. Funky fungi. When it comes to organic foods, fruits and vegetables usually steal the spotlight. But there's a strange cousin in the organic family that's just as fascinating: mushrooms. Mushrooms can look pretty odd, especially with that weird, gill-like structure on the underside of their caps called lamella. These gills have been creeping out picky eaters for generations, but they actually serve a very important purpose. Fungi, like mushrooms, reproduce by releasing millions of tiny spores into the air. These spores float around until they land somewhere they can grow into new mushrooms. The lamella, or gills, are where these spores are produced. The folds between each gill are lined with microscopic cells that create spores and release them into the air regularly. So, when we eat mushrooms with lamella, we're actually munching on tiny spore factories. Maybe those fussy eaters are onto something after all. Cryptic cookies. Fortune cookies are a staple at Chinese restaurants in America, so it's easy to assume they're a traditional Chinese dessert. However, fortune cookies were actually invented in America, and their story begins in Japan. In Japanese culture, an amakuji is a written fortune you receive at temples and shrines. In Kyoto, some stores hand out amakuji along with a traditional cookie, a large, savory version of what we know as a fortune cookie. When Japanese immigrants moved to America in the 1800s, they brought this cookie recipe with them. Over time, Japanese chefs in California adapted the recipe, turning it into a sweet dessert with a fortune tucked inside, creating the modern fortune cookie. But during World War II, when the United States was at war with Japan, the US government placed about 2/3 of Japanese Americans in detention camps, forcing many Japanese businesses to close. As Japanese restaurants shut down, Chinese restaurants began selling fortune cookies, and they quickly became popular. By the time the war ended in 1945, most Americans believed the fortune cookie originated in China, a misconception that has stuck around ever since. Today, few people know about the cookie's Japanese origins, and they're still considered one of the most popular Chinese snacks in America. That said, I never bother with fortune cookies. If I go out for Chinese food, I already know my future. A night spent lying on the couch in a food coma. Well, that about wraps up our look at the strange things you see in your food. Do you know about any little food factoids I might have missed? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.